"Mommy, can I have the blue crayon?" Emily murmured, gently tugging at my sleeve. I smiled and reached into my purse, pulling out our trusty restaurant activity kit, a collection of quiet toys and coloring supplies I always carry to keep my kids occupied during meals out. My name is Olivia, and at 35, I've perfected the art of dining out with 3 well-behaved children. Emily, 7, was focused on coloring her kids' menu, while Max, 5, worked through a puzzle book. Even little Sophie sat quietly, arranging her stuffed animals on the booster seat. That's why my sister-in-law, Amanda's sharp voice, caught me off guard. "Oh my God, not the crayons again. This is Bella Luna, not some fast food joint." She rolled her eyes, adjusting her designer dress. "Can't you keep your kids under control for one night?" I inhaled deeply, keeping my composure. "They're being quiet, Amanda. They're just coloring while we wait for our food." My mother-in-law, Margaret, chimed in, her voice laced with disapproval. When Amanda was little, she knew how to behave in upscale restaurants. Perhaps if you focus more on teaching manners instead of whatever this is. She waved dismissively at the activity kit. Heat crept up my face, but I kept my voice steady. "My children are well behaved. They're not bothering anyone." The truth was, this dinner was tense before it even began. It was meant to celebrate my father-in-law's retirement, but like every family gathering since James passed away 2 years ago, it felt more like a test of endurance. My late husband's family had always been critical, but without him there to mediate, their judgment had become relentless. Amanda sighed dramatically, checking her reflection in her phone. "When Thomas and I have kids, they won't treat fine dining like a daycare." Just then, Sophie accidentally tipped over her water glass. The spill was small and contained to the table, but Amanda reacted as if she'd been drenched. "That's it," she shrieked, drawing the attention of nearby diners. "I can't take this anymore. You and your undisciplined children need to leave." Emily's lower lip quivered as she slowly set down her crayon. Max clutched his puzzle book, and Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Amanda, lower your voice," I said firmly, grabbing a napkin to wipe the spill. "You're the only one making a scene." "No, Amanda's absolutely right," Margaret declared, lifting her chin. "This is a fine restaurant, not a playground. James would be horrified to see how much you've let things slide since." She hesitated, but her meaning was clear. "Since he passed." My father-in-law, Gerald, sat in silence, staring at his menu, while Amanda's husband, Thomas, suddenly became engrossed in his phone. Neither of them was willing to stand up to their wives, even for their own grandchildren. I stood up, my pulse racing but my voice firm. "We're leaving, but not because we did anything wrong. We're leaving because I refuse to let my children be treated this way." As I helped Sophie out of her booster seat, a familiar figure approached. Marco Salvatore, the restaurant owner, walked toward our table with purpose. Though we'd never spoken, everyone in town recognized him. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his Italian accent warm but his gaze sharp. Amanda instantly switched to a saccharine smile. "Oh, Mr. Salvatore, I'm so sorry for the disruption. We were just explaining to my sister-in-law that this isn't the kind of place for small children." Marco's expression shifted as he glanced at my kids, then back at Amanda. "Not appropriate? That's interesting, considering these children have dined here many times." Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Impossible. We're regulars here, and we've never seen them." "No," Marco agreed. "You wouldn't have. They usually come for lunch with their father." My breath hitched. You knew James?" Marco nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting, uninvited. "He saved this restaurant a decade ago when the bank was about to foreclose. James restructured our finances, gave us a chance to survive. He never wanted recognition, he just loved the food." He glanced at my kids and smiled. "He used to bring Emily here when she was a baby. Said the smell of our bread reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen." Tears pricked at my eyes. James never mentioned this, but it was exactly the kind of quiet kindness he was known for. Marco turned to Amanda and Margaret, his expression cooling. "In Italy, family is everything. It is those who judge children for simply being children who misunderstand true hospitality." A hush fell over the table. Amanda's face turned an impressive shade of red, while Margaret seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Marco turned back to me, his smile kind. "Now I believe it's time for a special dessert. Emily, would you like to help me in the kitchen? Your father told me you love to bake." Emily's eyes lit up as she glanced at me. I nodded, watching her excitement as she followed Marco, Max, and Sophie trailing behind. Left alone with my in-laws, I felt a surprising sense of peace. You know, I said softly, James always said this place felt like home. Now I understand why. The mood at the table had shifted. Amanda stabbed at her pasta in silence, while Margaret had lost her appetite entirely. But Gerald, who had barely spoken since James's funeral, suddenly cleared his throat. I remember when this place was just a tiny cafe, he said, voice rough with emotion. James used to bring home takeout from here every Sunday. Said the owner reminded him of his grandfather. It was the most he had spoken about James in 2 years. Just then, my kids returned from the kitchen, faces glowing and dusted with flour. Mommy, Max whispered excitedly. Mr. Marco taught us to make cannoli, and he has pictures of Daddy on his wall. Sophie nodded, clutching a paper bag. He gave us special cookies. Emily, more perceptive than her years, looked between the adults before quietly adding, There's a plaque in the kitchen with Daddy's name. Mr. Marco says he was a hero. Margaret's poised mask cracked just a little. She had spent 2 years trying to dictate how we should grieve, how we should remember James. But here, in the very place she had dismissed, was a part of him we'd never known. Marco returned, carrying a tray of desserts. These were James's favorites, he said, setting them down. He'd order them every Friday during our meetings. I frowned. Friday meetings? But he always said he had client appointments. Marco's eyes twinkled. He did. But he also made time to help me with the books, teach me about loans, and make sure this restaurant could last for future families. He looked directly at Amanda and Margaret. All families. Amanda shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know James was involved here. Gerald, for the first time in years, met my gaze. There was a lot you didn't know about my son. His voice was steady, strong. For the first time since James had died, I felt something lift inside me. We belonged here. Olivia, I'm sorry. Gerald's voice carried a weight that made the entire table pause. His usual reserved demeanor had softened, and for the first time in years, real emotion shone through. We've been so focused on appearances that we forgot what James truly cared about. Margaret opened her mouth, ready to protest, but Gerald held up a hand, silencing her, something that had likely never happened in their marriage. No, Margaret. Look at them, he said, gesturing toward the children. They're not misbehaving. They're learning, exploring, just like their father used to. Marco gave a satisfied nod before a server approached with a small leather-bound book. Mrs. Harrison, the young woman said, offering it to Olivia. Mr. Salvatore wanted you to have this. It's a collection of recipes your husband helped preserve when we updated our system. He even left notes in the margins. Olivia's hands trembled as she opened it. There, in James's familiar handwriting, were little remarks about the dishes. Emily would love the chocolate in this. Gotta bring Max when he's old enough to appreciate real tiramisu. And then the last note, dated just a week before the accident. Sophie's first birthday soon. Maybe Marco will help me plan something special. He never got the chance. Olivia's throat tightened. I started. Her voice faltered. But before she could finish, Emily did, her young voice steady and sure. But we can. Mr. Marco said we can come back anytime, Max chimed in. He'll teach us Daddy's favorite recipes. For the first time that evening, Thomas found his voice. Amanda, he said, turning to his wife, I think we owe Olivia and the kids an apology. Amanda looked like she'd swallowed something bitter, but before she could respond, a tiny hand reached out. Sophie. The little girl placed her small paper bag of cookies in front of Amanda, her expression pure and sincere. Daddy always said sharing makes things better, she said. You can have my cookies, Auntie Amanda. Something in Amanda's perfectly curated mask cracked. She stared at the bag, then at Sophie's trusting face. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then, louder, I'm sorry, Olivia. I've been awful. James would be so disappointed in me. Margaret sat stiffly, her fingers trembling as they clutched her glass. The world she had so carefully built, where etiquette mattered more than emotion, was starting to crumble. Olivia took a deep breath. Maybe we could start a new tradition. Friday dinners here, in James's honor. The kids can learn about their father's legacy, and we can remember him the way he'd want, together, over a good meal. Gerald was the first to nod. I think that's a wonderful idea. He turned to Margaret and Amanda. What do you say? Ready to understand what this place meant to James. The aroma of fresh bread filled Bella Luna as Olivia sat at their usual Friday night table, watching Emily knead dough alongside Marco in the open kitchen. Max was carefully setting the table, Sophie skipping behind him, proudly arranging the special children's menus that James had secretly helped design years ago. The transformation in their family over the past year had been nothing short of remarkable. Margaret, once obsessed with rules and appearances, now wore a flour-dusted apron, learning traditional Italian recipes alongside her grandchildren. Her manicured nails were no longer pristine, and she seemed lighter, happier. Olivia, she called from the kitchen, excitement in her voice. Come taste this sauce. I think I finally got James' recipe just right. It still surprised Olivia, this new version of her mother-in-law. Ever since that first night, Margaret had thrown herself into discovering James's connection to Bella Luna, each revelation softening the walls she had once held so high. Even Amanda had changed. She still wore her designer outfits, but they were often covered with an apron now, as she learned the delicate art of making fresh pasta. Her pregnancy announcement 3 months ago had come with a humble request. She wanted her child to grow up knowing about Uncle James. The sauce is perfect, Olivia told Margaret, tasting a spoonful, exactly how James described it. Just then, Gerald and Marco walked over, carrying old photographs they had found in the restaurant's archives. Look at this, Gerald said, his voice full of emotion. James's first business meeting here. The black and white photo showed a young James, tie loosened, laughing at something with Marco. Between them were stacks of paperwork and half-eaten plates of food. He saw something special here, Marco said. Not just good food, but heart. Family. He understood that's what truly makes a place great. Sophie climbed onto Olivia's lap, her tiny fingers tracing the picture of her father's face. Daddy's laughing, she murmured. He always did here, Marco agreed. Even when times were tough, he'd say, Marco, as long as there's good food and family, there's hope. At that moment, Thomas walked in carrying a large gift-wrapped package. Found it, he announced. The sign company finally finished it. They gathered around as he pulled back the wrapping, revealing a beautifully carved wooden plaque. In memory of James Harrison, who believed in good food, strong coffee, and the power of family, his legacy lives on in every meal shared here. A lump formed in Olivia's throat. It's perfect. Marco beamed. Now everyone will know his story, and speaking of stories, his daughter Maria carried out a leather-bound book, their family recipe book. It had started with James's notes but had since grown to include their own additions. Emily's first marinara sauce, Max's creative pizza toppings, Sophie's special way of arranging an antipasto platter. Even Amanda had contributed, using her eye for detail to refine plating techniques. Time for a new entry, Marco announced. Margaret's perfected sauce deserves a page. As they gathered around, Olivia took it all in, the laughter, the camaraderie, the way grief had evolved into something warm and lasting. Gerald placed a hand on Margaret's shoulder. James would love this. Not just the cooking, but all of it. Us together, making new memories. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with the edge of her apron. He always knew better than us, didn't he? About what really matters. Olivia looked around at the family that had once been fractured, now bound by flour-covered hands and shared stories. To James, Marco toasted, raising his glass. To James, they all echoed, even the kids, lifting their juice cups. And in that moment, Olivia felt him there. Not in the stiff formalities of the past, not in Margaret's old expectations, but in the joy, in the mess, in the love poured into every imperfectly made dish. As Sophie giggled, attempting to teach Margaret how to twirl spaghetti, like Daddy showed me in heaven, Nana, Olivia smiled. Sometimes the most precious legacies aren't found in grand gestures. Sometimes they begin in the most unexpected places, even in a restaurant where someone once tried to throw you out. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Stay tuned.